bring in, and Kim, I think this was, for me personally, tucked into something you said there, the question about Shifra and Pua and their disobedience to authority for in submission to perhaps a greater authority, a greater moral authority. And is there anything with respect to their lives that we can learn and apply in our own day?
Well, I would love to chime in on that one.
Please go ahead.
If I may. I think we had talked about this in one of our meetings, but I would love to read to you what Rabbi Sachs says about that. Because this is usually looked at these great women that they just don't pay attention. They save lives, but there's a principle that is being released here that is really going to become something, I think, that is extremely valuable for the time in which we live. And that is the principle there are moral limits to power. And they did not obey Paro because it was immoral. To murder is immoral. It's, in fact, we're not even at Sinai yet. We are not even hearing the 10 Commandments yet. The conscience alone knows it's immoral. And so let me read this very brief comment from Rabbi Sachs, the Honorable Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory. He passed just a couple months ago now. And that is about Shifra and Puah. It says the significance of this story is that it is the first recorded instance of one of Judaism's greatest contributions to civilization, the idea that there are moral limits to power. There are instructions that should not be obeyed. There are crimes against humanity that cannot be excused by the claim that I was only obeying orders. This concept, generally known as civil disobedience, is usually attributed to the 19th century American writer Henry David Thoreau and entered international consciousness after the Holocaust and Nuremberg trials. Its true origin, though, lies thousands of years earlier in the actions of two women, Shifra and Puah.
And they were not Jewish women, they were most likely Egyptian women. And altogether, the role of women in this whole story is so vital, so crucial. We would not have gotten anywhere without these women.
I think it's also very interesting to see how God rewards them. Because if you look at the bottom of the page right now, he established households for them. And what is the expression of establishing households for them mean? It doesn't mean that God built a house for them. We know later on, we hear throughout the prophets about the house of Israel and the house of Joseph. Houses are essentially families that live beyond a generation, from generation to generation. That's really what,
like a dynasty.
Exactly.
Sorry?
A dynasty, he said.
A dynasty, great. Yeah. So essentially, we see that God is not just building an Israeli dynasty here. He's also building dynasties for all who accept his moral law, who want to abide by God's sense of justice, as Dean mentioned earlier. So I think it's really very, very beautiful to see here, as we said before, this is not just about the redemption of Israel. This is the redemption of all mankind, and any who truly accept God's moral code becomes rewarded by him, because he wants to partner with everyone.
I agree, and it's interesting. how this term, God-fearer, becomes applied to the God-fearer becomes applied to anyone who is outside of the house of Israel who is taking hold of the 10 Commandments and the moral laws and moral codes of God. God begins to really put almost to mark them as a God-fearer, and that is, it's like, I'm going after them, I'm bringing them into the house, So.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There are some psalms that we sing in the temple. Yirei Hashem, how does it go? It says, it talks about Beit Aaron, Baruch et Hashem, and then the last line it says, Yirei Hashem, Baruch et Hashem. May the fearers of God bless God. They should all say Baruch Hashem. We know that the first ones to say Baruch Hashem are Gentiles in the Bible, and we really have this notion of all of us ultimately celebrating in God's house together with the Yirei Hashem, those who fear God, joining in so that we can all thank Him and celebrate Him, God, Hashem, together in His house.